Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the PayrollCentric Thursday webinars. We're so glad of our loyal folks who join us. Today, we are going to be talking about terminations and making sure your employees are classified correctly. Doing manual checks, we do still get a lot of questions about that, so Charles is going to review that. But we figured at the beginning of the year, many people are cleaning up and purging and tidying up their homes. How about if we clean up and purge and tidy up our accounts here at PayrollCentric? And Charles has an easy way to get that done. It is also really good when you learn what the tricks are in order to get that accomplished. And Charles is going to show us all about that. So Charles, with that, please take it away.
Thank you very much, Saundra. So, as she said, there are some things to clean up at the end of each year, like your employees, clean up your employee file so you don't have people sitting there as active employees that keep showing up and they haven't been there for 2-3 years. And also for things like, I think we actually had something about, looking up people's salary ranges, things like that, just to see, this is a time of year to reflect and see, okay, what's going to be for the rest of the year. Well, as we're talking about spring cleaning and winter, I'll go ahead and go into the employee section right here. And we're going to look at, Johnny Appleseed. And we're going to look at terminating. So I went into the employee section, I clicked on the employee underneath the search, and now I'm going to go to the demographics section because most everybody that calls knows how to get to this point, and yet they're not sure where to go to terminate somebody. And these are calls that I do receive. It's like, how do you terminate an employee? And you just go to demographics, either by clicking on demographics in the menu or clicking on the little black dot next to the demographics. And it's under employee status, which is over on the right-hand side. I'm going to highlight it right here, employment status. And so what we have here is for the employee status is currently active. And this is where we go on the drop-down. And by the way, the drop-down, we can add other classifications in here. Right now it has leave of absence, other, or terminated. We could add things like retired. We can add things like deceased, and all sorts of items in here, just depending upon what our client, wants to see in here for their statuses. So I'm going to go ahead and click on terminated, and up pops this box, okay, or new window, and just waiting for it to feed in. And here's a couple of things in here. It's like, well, what do these all mean? Well, the termination date obviously is what day they were terminated. And then a termination reason. This is something that we can also expand. Our defaults are involuntary or voluntary, but you can do other things as resigned, fired for cause, or something like that. Whatever you want to have as your termination reasons, or you could leave it like this. And you don't even have to put that in. The two key pieces are the termination date, all right, and the effective date. Because the termination date will be listing what day they were terminated, and the effective date will tell the system when this change goes into effect. So that's very important. Number one thing I run into when I have clients that call in about terminations, I terminated somebody, but I didn't put the right date. Now I can't change it. It's because it's been grayed out because you have an effective date, like say in the future, right? The 5th. And so for that, you do need to make sure that the effective date, what I always say is the effective date should match the termination date. And then also you have an option of last day worked. If you want to keep that kind of information, you can of course put it in here. So you can have a last day worked that's different than their firing date. Let's say you waited to hear from them and finally there's a decision that had to be made. You terminate them on a particular date, but the last day they worked was some time else. We also have where you can end certain items in here, like say direct deposits. And this is a good idea to mark that, because let's say that this person is leaving and you don't know if they'll ever come back, but you put direct deposits marked off just to be sure for a couple of reasons. One is if this isn't filled out correctly and if this isn't being filled out correctly, or what have you, then to keep a direct deposit from going into possibly another payroll. Also, if you ever rehire somebody, to keep that direct deposit from being old accounts that they're not using anymore. So you always want to confirm things like, is their address the same? Is their taxes the same? Things like that. And so you would want to mark direct deposit, just because if you forget to change that and their direct deposit goes to an old account that's no longer being used, then there's a whole issue of the account's been closed. You have to wait for the money to come back. They didn't get paid, that kind of thing. So if you mark it like this, then of course, if they were, the worst that would happen is they would receive a live check. So I'll just go ahead and cancel this. But if we were to continue with the termination, it would fill in the information like the date, the term reason, last day worked, and so forth. So I'm just going to go down the bottom and cancel that because I'm not doing that right now. We decided we're going to keep Johnny Appleseed. He's a good worker. And that is everything that's in the termination. And if you rehire, you can just go ahead and change the status back to active. Now you may get a window that pops up asking you about the rehire date, and then if you want to, have things re-reported for the employee, or you may not. If you put them as active, though, you can always put in a rehire date as to when they were rehired as well, if you don't get that window. And then we were talking also about classifications. So in classifications, what we're talking about is there's a wide variety of things. I mean, for instance, there's the employment type that's here. It's an optional one. And again, this one has additional items in here. Usually you have regular full-time, part-time, temp full-time, temp part-time. But we've added journeyman and apprentice. And again, this is something that's optional. It's not required in order to have an employee to fill out this employment type. Why does it matter? If you wanted to keep track of this kind of information, be able to run reports that displays who is a full-time and part-time employee just by this information, you would want to have this filled in. And again, you can always send us a list of the different employment types that you want to have in the system so that you can keep track. That's the part, for reporting. If you want to run reports to do like certain information about your company, that kind of thing. Reports are something that we've come into contact a lot in payroll. Reports are everything, except of course the actual payroll processing. That's one kind of classification. Another kind, we're going to go into department and position to talk about. And as you can see, we have all these different divisions. Our default setting is 3. One's a department, one's a location, that kind of thing. And so this is something that you can use to set up the structure of your company. Let's say you want to have everybody listed in a different location, like you're in 3 different states, and you want to have 3 different locations for those states. You want California, Oregon, and Nevada, right? So you can set it up that you have locations, and then you can set up departments underneath that. So you can see is we have division is the top one. And then underneath it, we have Division 2, which is high school, then 3, and so forth. So we can set up a hierarchy for these. We would just need to know what your hierarchy is. We set these up based upon what you have. Now, we do have to list a department for every employee in your companies regardless. And so we have a default all employees that is set up. And most of the time that's useful, especially when you have one location, one store, that's it. But we can also set up ones that I've had for restaurant clients. You want to list your chefs, you want to list your kitchens, you want to list your kitchen staff, you want to list your service staff, and so forth. List them separately. Why? Because if you happen to have to run any reports or want to run any reports to keep track of of your business. See how much staff you have in one section or another. See if you're understaffed or overstaffed, what have you. You can do this with the reports. It also helps you to figure out how much each section is costing you, because you can run reports that show you which departments have what wages. It's a labor distribution report. We use it for other purposes, but the primary purpose is to see how much of your payroll is being devoted to a particular department. It looks at the distribution of your labor. And that could be a key tool in order to develop your business plan. So you do want to provide us with this information if this is how you have your company structured, right? Do you have a location in the South Bay and then a location in the Valley, and you want to try and track which one's costing more money, which one's making more money. You can do it that way. So that's the kind of classification we're looking for. And that's useful at the beginning of the year, because then you can set up all the employees in those different sections, and the reports will be consistent throughout. This employee is in this department, this employee is in this department, and so forth. That's useful. So at the beginning of the year, if you have such a structure, you tell us, we set it up, and then we can have it assigned to the employees. And now I did mention something else, is that we're looking at things like what employees are getting paid. Well, then we can go into the reporting section, and we can click on the title right here, and we're going to look at employee listing. Now, why is it employee listing? Well, if I do a search, I pull up the employee listing report, and then I pull up, then I say to run the report, and I have it, sorry, I'm going up a little bit. It's sorted, excuse me, by department and then ID. And I go down to the bottom and I click on run report. And what it's going to do is it's going to give me the report. It's going to give me a list of all the employees, by which department they're in, by their ID, and then it's also going to list their hourly and their salary rates. And so we're going to look in and we're going to come up close. And so we have 3 in the Division 100, Department 4, that have 0 pay rates. Same thing for this. And then we look at Division 100 right here in D5 100, and we see that there's salaries, and then there's hourly employees. And by the way, this is a report that is, with some editing, will be an easy conversion into Excel. So this is one that there will be some minor editing to remove like empty fields and things like that, but you can put it into Excel and then, use it however you would any kind of report that has this data. And that would be this kind of thing where you can see how much each person is making and tell what it is that they're supposed to be. And since this is our demo site, you also see, oh, wait a minute, this person's under minimum wage. I may need to do something about that. And that's that section. And there's other reports that we can run as well. So it just depends on what you need. I don't know if we have a salary range report, but I'm going to go ahead and find out for you. So let's see. By typing range, and I hit search, and we don't have one. Not to worry though, we do have that other report, and like I said, if you put it into an Excel format, you can like filter for all the ones that have salary instead of hourly, and see what the ranges are for the different people in the different departments. It's a very useful tool. And then the last thing, and this is one that Saundra brought to my attention because we do get questions about it a lot. This is manual checks. By the way, if anybody has questions about this, we'll go ahead and go over them at the tail end, and Saundra usually announces them to me. Saundra will let me know if she has a question that she thinks we might want to address as well. Go to manual check, and it's here right on the front. We have this right here for you on the front, so you can just click on manual check and go to it. And so we're looking at Johnny Appleseed. It was looking at him simply because he was who I've been looking at this whole time, so it remembered that. But I can select, let's see, Kelly Clarkson. All right, we forgot to pay her, so we need to pay her for her time. That work on American Idol was also work she did for us. So let's hit create. Now, when it changes to delete, that we know we can continue. Sometimes it will take a couple of times to click on it, especially if it's on a terminated employee. It may do that. So we click on it, and this is where we have the Start tab. Start tab is used for certain things here. For instance, if you happen to if you know the net amount, but you want to see what it is grossed up, you would click on this. And what that means is that, let's say you're giving somebody $50 in Christmas bonus, right? But that still, because it is compensation, needs to be taxed. Well, what is the gross of those $50 that you give them? Well, this will tell you by putting in the 50 figure, and then let's see here, and then just click on details, and it will populate it right here. The reason I clicked on details was, well, I didn't need to. right? I'll stay on start. But what happens is you'll see right here on the right-hand side, after a second or two, is it will calculate what that is. And you can view the check details to see the breakdown. So we see that for $50, the gross is 142.17. Why is that? It's because they have other stuff going on in here. They have like this benefit right here and medical. These are things that are set up automatically on the employee, so those can affect it. Or if they happen to have, say, in federal income tax, they have to have a certain amount where they say this has to be withheld every pay period regardless, right? If they had a voluntary amount, it will take that into account and it'll tell you how much the gross is for this. So I click, we close this, and let's say we're not doing a gross to net. By the way, one thing you don't want to do is you don't want to uncheck this. This is what blocks the direct deposit, and it's automatically set to block it. Because if you uncheck it, then the employee will get a direct deposit for this manual check. You can also do other things like change the tax frequency or use the supplemental tax rates. That's for things that are like bonuses and commissions. The IRS has an entire page devoted to what is eligible for supplemental tax rates. The one thing I can say is that you cannot combine their regular pay with the bonus and use the supplemental tax rates. Regular pay has to be taxed in a regular way. And so then we go ahead and click on details, and this is a different way to enter the check, and it is what you're going to be using most often. And it looks like the payroll entry grid. And you would just select the code. All right, let's see here. Regular. You can enter the hours. And just like in the grid, the rate field is where if you're overriding the default rate on the employee. The amount field is where you're either overriding the calculation or entering just the amount, like say for bonuses and so forth. And then if you click on save in the lower left, it will update the information on the right here where you have the net pay, the gross, this is the summary, and then you can view the check details. Okay. And then after that, what do you look at next? Well, we can look at, say, if they have any auto pays or earnings or deductions, right? And if they do, you can mark them. Right? So you can tell it that you want to include this deduction, and everything on a manual check has to be done manually. So if they are going to have their medical deduction withheld on it, you do have to check it, or taxes. And this is where you can block the federal and the state income. It does give the option to block the SDI, but you don't want to because that is a tax that has to be withheld. But California state income tax and federal income tax, if you wish to block withholding on that, you would just check the box. And then also it lists what their pay rate is. And then the last part, and this is the part that I do need to go over the most with clients to make sure they understand, is this is the save print section. This is where you can actually print up a copy of the manual check, but it has other items here, like what is the printed check date. You can select that. You can leave it here. It defaults to the next check date, or you can just go ahead and click on it and select a date. And you can do the same thing for the pay period so that it reflects the pay period that you want on the check. Now, a manual check will record with the next payroll. But what this does is when you're actually getting the printing of the check statement, it will reflect the information here. And then for bank account, you always want it to be the primary, or also it's also known as a client account. Your list will probably be just that one account. That will be the only one you have access to, but you want to make sure that it's listed there. And then the check number can be one of two things. The check number can be either 999 or the check number that you have for the check you're going to issue to the employee. Why do we say 999? Because sometimes when clients are setting this up, they don't have the check number yet. They need to get it from another department where that gets printed and so forth. So that's what we have in that situation here. If you know the check number, you can enter it here. If not, you can just enter 999 like this. And then for check memo, that's an option if you want to put on there, good luck, sorry to see you go, a Merry Christmas, whatever, for whatever purpose for the check is for. And then the last thing is print and save manual check. Now, if you click save check, it will save it, but no PDF will be generated. If you click on print and save manual check, it's going to ask you if you're sure, of course. And then if you have your pop-ups enabled, then it's going to appear as a PDF. And then another thing to remember with this is that the PDF is going to actually be what would be printed out normally. Okay? So it's going to have a section on top that looks like a check, and you can actually print this on check stock paper, and it would be a authentic check. So this section right here is the check, and the bottom part is a statement. Now, for what I do recommend, best practice is for our clients to go ahead and cut off this top part right underneath the numbers here and above the earnings statement where it's listed right here in this right across this line. Because if the employee gets it and they can print it on something that looks like check stock, say, or somebody gets this, they can print it on something that looks like check stock, and then they can take a photo of it on their phone. A lot of times, that's how people do their checks nowadays, is they use the phone app, and it gets submitted that way. There's no even reading of this number by the micro reader that you see them pass it through when you actually go into the bank. So you do want to, just best practice, chop that part off, and then you can shred it. And then you can hand the earnings statement portion. After, if you want to make a copy for yourself, you can make a copy for yourself. Hand the earning statement portion, or copy of, to the employee, along with the check that you're issuing them. And that's the check section. So if you close this, you would see on dash, it says the check has been printed. If you wish to delete this check, you must do so via the voids, manuals, VM batch, and payroll. And I'll get to that in a second. So first off, it has this finish down here, but it's already done. You can click on finish if you want, but if you don't click on it, it doesn't mean that nothing's saved. What saved it was that save and print. So I click on finish. Then it takes me to the tools, because that's where the manual check calculator actually sits. But I'm going to click on payroll. And then I'm going to go into entry, because I made a mistake on that check. It's not supposed to be going out. It was their final check, but they decided to stay on. So I'm going to go into the VM batch. This is the voids and manual batch. I'm just going to click on the individual. I'm going to find Johnny Appleseed. And so if you make well, that's interesting. It was supposed to be there. Or did I click on the wrong one? Probably clicked on the wrong one. Well, that is most interesting. Did I do it to him? Oh, well, what I can do is I can go to employees and batch to see who it was on, and click on it twice. Oh, yes, now I remember. I didn't do it on Johnny Appleseed. I did it on Kelly Clarkson. So even I have a brain fade every once in a while. So on this one, if you need to delete the check that you entered because it was incorrect for any reason, you would go in here and you would just click on the black X, and it deletes the check. And that's it. That's everything regarding a manual check. And at this point, if there's any questions, or if there's anything around this time of year that you have a question about and you want to go over, we can go over.
Hello, Charles. Question from me.
Yes.
All right. So on the manual check, if I have a standard deduction, perhaps it's a garnishment, and I've already paid the garnishment through my regular pay, and I don't want the garnishment to hit the bonus. Is it okay to block that garnishment? And if so, how do you do that?
It depends on the terms of the garnishment, because there are certain garnishments that are always a percentage of your earnings, and those have to be taken regardless. But there are also ones like child support, which is a set amount every month. And if you've already had that withheld, if you get extra pay, you shouldn't have to pay it out. unless of course you didn't meet that set amount. If your child support, because child support is a set amount, but no more than 50% of your taxable of your disposable wages. But if you hadn't met that, then of course, then yes, it does have to come out. But if you've met that already for that month, then you have to, then you can have it not taken out. Now, how do you do that? Well, as I said, on a manual check, everything is manual. So if I go to manual check and I click on create, and then I go to deductions. Now we don't have a deduction set up for this person, but let's see here. Create deductions. So right here. So for this one, for Johnny Appleseed, we do have deductions set up for him. They're automatically unchecked. In order to add them in here, you would need to check them. So if you're not supposed to include something, you don't have to worry about it. It's not included unless you select to include it. So that's how the deductions work. The deductions will not occur on a manual check unless you actively come in there when you're doing the manual check and check the box.
So where you unclick the boxes, what tab were you on for that? The taxes tab or the auto pay tab?
That would be the taxes tab.
Okay.
But the taxes tab, again, these are unchecked. You check it if you want to block it.
Okay.
So yeah, there's not one here that where it's like you have to uncheck it. It's if you want to block the taxes, you have to check the boxes for that. If you want to include the deductions, you have to check the box. Otherwise, it will default to the taxes are not blocked and the deductions are not withheld.
So they're not going to get the $50 that you want them to get in the first place because you're taking more deductions out, right?
Well, no, what it is actually is they are going to get the $50 because none of these are going to come out because they're all unchecked.
Oh, that's right. Okay.
So it says include ? So you check them to include them.
Okay.
And then on taxes, you check these to block them.
Got it.
Right here.
Okay. Perfect. We do have a question in the chat. If you had to delete a regular payroll check for whatever reason, is the way you showed us how you would do it for a regular payroll check, or is it only manual?
Yes, because the way I showed you was I went actually into the payroll and into the entry, and I went to the VM batch, and I clicked on that. But if you went into the regular batch, it is the same thing, right? You click on that black X, and it will delete the check.
Okay. And you can only do that if you hadn't hit finish, right?
Well, you can only do that if it hasn't been submitted. Once it's, and I mean, you can click on finish, but and this just says approve of payroll and submit for processing. This is just like a warning. But at the end, after you've done everything, this says close and submit. Once you hit close and submit, that payroll is submitted to us and we're processing. Does that mean that you can't make adjustments after you hit that? No, it doesn't. But it is very difficult. It's very difficult because as soon as we get it, we try to process it right away. Once it's processed, if we send out these electronic transmission files that have the information, we send them out to the banks, we send them out to the tax agencies, and that's done in the afternoon. That's done in the afternoon. So anytime before that is done, if you need this to be fixed, we can do a deletion of those files, those electronic files, but it's a $25 charge to do it. So you want to try and avoid having to fix anything after you submit by taking care of it beforehand. Best practice is before you submit this is to review everything. This is why under totals, you have to run the pre-process register in order to submit the payroll. Because if you don't, you can't lock the batches. And if you can't lock the batches, you can't submit. So you have to run the pre-process register. And that's not just to make an additional step, that's to give you the tool of reviewing the payroll before you submit. Exactly. Because it's easier to take care of before you submit than to fix something afterwards.
And less costly.
Yes.
Yeah, it's worth the time and effort to do it that way.
Oh, yes.
Okay. One other question I had, if you would go back to the employee tab where all the employees are listed,
Yes, ma'am.
and if you go down to the filter where it says all employees or it says active employees, I have a question probably once a week. How come I terminated these employees and they're still showing up on my list of employees? And that's because you didn't do the drop down of the active versus all employees. Does it make a difference in running payroll? Well, it's just probably just more employees to have to look at when you're trying to enter hours, and mistakes can happen that way.
Yes.
But the best thing to do is to be sure that you usually have your drop down for active employees, and then you hit the search button so that all the active employees are filtered and showing to you, and all the inactive employees are hidden behind the scenes. We never want to delete an employee from your account, because what if? What if an employee comes back and says, I worked for you in 2020 and I need all my pay stubs? Well, they're still there. You can get the pay stubs. And if you deleted them, you would not be able to do that. And I don't think that the employer has the ability to delete an employee anyway, right, Charles?
Well, actually, if they have payroll history, they cannot be deleted by either the employer or by us here at PayrollCentric. If there is no history, then they can be. That's rarely the case, because the only reasons that you might do that is if you started entering, you entered somebody and they never showed up.
Right.
Or because everything else is like, is it a bad number or anything like that? It's most everything except the employee ID, once it's entered, is editable. So that would be the only reason, is if they're entered and there shouldn't be a reason. Like maybe somebody got entered twice in error and the second one has never had any payroll history at all. You can delete them. But the system will tell you if you can delete them, right? Because if I go to employee task and I click on delete employee, it says employee has pay history, delete is not allowed. I'd have to select somebody who has no pay history. So let me see. Does Johnny? Yes, he does. Let's see. So $6 million man, no pay history. I could delete him. But anybody that does have a pay history, it will not allow me to. And then, as we saw, on the employee, you have a filter for active here. You also have one for inside payroll. So if I go into the batch, and you can do the filter here. And then also, if I were doing where I was entering them all under the template, let's see. Right. If you see somebody in here where their name is in italics and there's a green plus right next to them, that means they're not in the batch. Could be because they're terminated. We don't include the terminated employees if they're into the payroll. You may see their name when you go through, but you will not see a check, unless, of course, you add it. Now, what you do want to do, and what we've done at the beginning, was when we talked about terminating employees. What you don't want to see is someone that's in here that shouldn't be and accidentally pay them. That's why we say if you terminate them and then you filter by active employees, you won't see them. So if I do all employees, you see Raggedy Ann. If I click on this green dot, a green plus sign, she's added. Okay. And if I go in the other way and I go to all employees, and then I select Raggedy Ann here, there's no check. I would have to add it. But that's only because they are terminated in the system. If they are not terminated in the system, but they are no longer there, it increases the likelihood that you might pay them in error.
Right. That's the purpose of house cleaning, right? To get through your employees and make sure that you've got term dates on there, make sure that you have only active employees showing, but know that you can get to the old records if you need to. PayrollCentric does maintain records for 3 years, and then after that, upon special request, we can retrieve older reports for you. I don't see any more questions in the chat. I see that we've lost a few people because they've got stuff to do. So I wanted to say thank you so much for joining us today and being a part of our payroll-centric family. Next week, we're going to be talking about some of the things that Linda Duffy covered: bereavement hours and leave codes and pre-tax and post-tax benefits. Charles is really good at that topic, so you don't want to miss it. So we'll see you all next week, February the 9th. It's flying by, folks, and we're looking forward to seeing you again. Have a wonderful day, everyone. Thank you so much for joining. Bye-bye for now.